There are some truly classic science fiction and fantasy novels from the 1970s. I'm sure you've heard of some of them. That's not what I'm talking about today. Here we look at the most underappreciated books that you perhaps should go read. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, horror, and other nerdy things that we enjoy. I'm Jim, the father of this channel, and I'm coming at you today with the 1970s, the decade where I was a child and reading none of the books that I'm talking about today. But there's some great books, and maybe some of you did read them eventually. If you enjoy this episode, be sure to give us a like, and we hope you'll subscribe to the channel. Check out all the other content Zach and I have on here just for your entertainment and edification. This is part 2 of this series of underappreciated fantasy and science fiction books, where I've used a mathematical formula to discern the 3 most underappreciated books. Want to know the details? Go check out the 1960s episode where I explain the calculations. But trust me, what I'm sharing with you today, it's not my opinion. They're not books that I knew about that I didn't think people valued enough. They're what the data points to. 3 books in each year of the 1970s that just don't get the recognition that seemingly they would deserve. If you've read all of these, I bow at your reading prowess, but I don't think any of you are out there because they're underappreciated. But I am interested to know what you think of these books, and if some of them are ones you've actually read before and have thoughts, let me know. Use the comment box. Anything you put down in the comments, I read it. I do respond. I really appreciate the engagement. All right, enough of that. Let's get to the books here. Just 3 for each year. I'm not adding more because I don't know the underappreciated books. I only know about the ones that were popular. These are not them. Let's get to what the data says. 1970 is where we begin. This year saw major releases like Ringworld by Larry Niven and Tau Zero by Powell Anderson, both award-nominated, well-publicized, and widely read novels. But several other 1970 books quietly pushed boundaries, tackled deeper themes, or broke genre conventions while receiving little fanfare or long-term recognition. The third most underappreciated science fiction or fantasy novel of 1970 is Walk to the End of the World by Susie McKee Carness. This is science fiction of the feminist dystopia style. That is not something we say much these days. And it's book 1 of the Holdfast Chronicles. A brutal and provocative dystopia in which post-apocalyptic society is dominated by misogynistic authoritarianism. That's what Walk to the End of the World brings to the page. It was radical for its time and largely dismissed or condemned by male-dominated fandom. Though later volumes, especially Motherlines, gained more attention, the first book laid the foundation for decades of feminist science fiction to follow. Number 2 for this year is The Year of the Quiet Sun by Wilson Tucker, science fiction of the time travel variety with political leanings. This is a standalone novel. It's underrated because it's a haunting, slow-burn time travel novel that critiques American racial tensions and political instability. It won a retrospective Campbell Memorial Award, but was mostly ignored on release, possibly due to its bleak portrayal of Civil War and race relations. Far less flashy than other 1970 time travel tales, it's a quiet masterpiece that ages uncannily well. And for the most underappreciated of 1970, I bring you And Chaos Died by Joanna Russ. Science fiction, again, of the feminist style, and it's a utopian, dystopian story. An experimental novel blending psychic evolution, gender politics, and societal critique, And Chaos Died explores a bifurcated Earth. One side technocratic and repressive, the other organic and telepathic. It deconstructs utopian ideals through sharp prose and layered narrative. Nominated for a Nebula, nonetheless remains one of the least discussed major feminist science fiction novels, likely due to its challenging style and Russ's complex themes. Moving on to 1971. While this year brought high profile works like A Time of Changes by Robert Silverberg and The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin, several other novels released that year offered bold, forward thinking ideas but never received the recognition they also deserved. The third most underappreciated is Time and Again by Jack Finney. Science fiction of a time travel variety and a historical fiction style. This is book one of the Time and Again duology, a time travel novel praised for its rich depiction of 1880s New York and its restrained, nostalgic tone. While it has a loyal following and high ratings, it's frequently overlooked in genre discussions, possibly due to its slow pacing, romanticism, and emphasis on atmosphere over action. It straddles the line between science fiction and historical fiction, which may have confused marketing and readership. Number two is The God Whale by T.J. Bass. Science fiction of the biopunk style and with dystopian leanings. This is book two of the Hive series, sequel to Half Past Human. This is a grim and fascinating biopunk novel set in a post-human Earth dominated by overpopulation and genetic engineering. The protagonist is a cryogenically revived cyborg confronting a society that's optimized everything except its humanity. While praised for inventiveness and dark satire, it's rarely remembered today, possibly due to its gruesome tone and biotechnological density. But the most underappreciated for 1971 is The Black Corridor by Michael Moorcock. Yep, one of our fans just went, yes, Moorcock, but underappreciated. This is science fiction of a psychological dystopia style and is a standalone book. This claustrophobic novel follows a man alone on a spacecraft, grappling with insanity, societal collapse, and deep isolation. Co-written with Hilary Bailey, but credited solely to Moorcock, it combines stream of consciousness, fragmented narrative, and typographical experimentation. Far more experimental than his better-known Elric or Jerry Cornelius stories, it's been largely forgotten, despite its innovative psychological depth. For 1972, we've got some classics in this year, like The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin, and The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. But several exceptional books from that year never reached mainstream attention despite their originality, literary strength, or social commentary. The third most underappreciated is Watership Down by Richard Adams. You're like, we know this book. Yeah, but originally, this fantasy, which is all animal allegory and a mythic adventure, it was misclassified. Though now a beloved classic, Watership Down was originally not recognized as fantasy, leading to its exclusion from science fiction and fantasy awards and discussions. A deeply mythic, politically resonant tale about a group of rabbits seeking a new home, it draws on heroic archetypes, survival themes, and invented language and lore. Today, it's sometimes labeled children's literature or animal fiction, still masking its genre richness. Number two is The Book of Skulls by Robert Silverberg, and I am guilty on this one. It's science fiction of a dark fantasy style, also philosophical horror. And my guilt is I owned this book for many years and never opened it. I didn't appreciate it. One of Silverberg's most introspective and experimental novels, this story follows four college students seeking immortality through an ancient monastic ritual, requiring two of them to die. It's a slow-burning meditation on death, sexuality, ambition, and identity. While Silverberg was a giant of science fiction, this novel is often left out of discussions despite being one of his most mature literary works. Why did I never read it when I owned it? I didn't buy it. I was given it. And no one told me what I had, and what I could find didn't wow me. Bad marketing. But number one for 1972 is The Iron Dream by Norman Spinrad. This is alternate history, satirical science fiction. I can kind of understand why this one ended up flying under the radar. A razor sharp meta narrative. You've got a faux pulp novel written by an alternate history Adolf Hitler, who immigrated to the US and became a science fiction author in this, again, alternate history. The book brilliantly parodies fascist tropes embedded in heroic fantasy and pulp sci-fi, criticizing genre conservatism while simultaneously mimicking it. Hugely controversial, it was banned in parts of Europe and dismissed by readers who took it at face value. You gotta see it for what it is to truly get it. But 1972 wasn't all that long after World War II. I could see this touching bad vibes. 1973. While this year gave us well-known classics like Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke and The Princess Bride by William Goldman, several exceptional books from the same year offered daring concepts or deep themes, but flew under the radar, either at release or in long-term recognition, never quite coming through. The third entry I have for this, the data really didn't support a clear, forgotten masterpiece like in the prior years of this series. So instead, I've got a bonus, lesser known but worthy work. And that would be The Dream Master by Roger Zelazny. It was reprinted for paperback in 1973. It originally came out back in 1966. This is science fiction of a psychological style with a focus on virtual reality and is a standalone novel. Despite Zelazny's fame, The Dream Master remains one of his lesser-known novels. It deals with a psychotherapist who enters patients' dreams via controlled hallucination, anticipating cyberpunk and VR themes by a whole decade. The book is deeply psychological, literary, and more emotionally resonant than most of Zelazny's better-known mythic fantasy work. Second most underappreciated is The Embedding by Ian Watson. Science fiction of a first contact style, this is a standalone novel. A conceptually dense novel about language, consciousness, and communication, with influences from Chomskyan linguistics and psychedelia. Just saying these things make my brain hurt. The plot includes human experiments on language deprivation and an alien race seeking a linguistic key to their survival. The novel was Watson's debut and received praise from literary critics, but its cerebral style and complexity limited its popularity. Most underappreciated from 1973 goes to Dying Inside by Robert Silverberg. Man, this guy's not getting some appreciation here in the 70s. Yeah, he got plenty of other appreciation. This book is science fiction of a psychological style and is a standalone novel. This introspective novel follows a telepath whose power is fading with age. A far cry from space opera or traditional speculative fiction, it's more a literary character study than a genre thrill ride. Despite being nominated for the Hugo, Nebula, and Locus Awards, it didn't win any of them, and it's still not widely read today. It's overshadowed now by flashier Silverberg works and more actionable sci-fi. Moving on, 1974 brought well-known works, like The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, which swept the big awards, Hugo, Nebula, and Locus. But as usual, some remarkable titles from the same year delivered exceptional content while remaining overlooked in award circuits, sales, or general visibility. Third most underrated is The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia A. McKillop. This is a fantasy novel, mythic in style, and falls into the feminist category of fantasy, and is a standalone novel. McKillop's lyrical, character-driven fantasy won the first World Fantasy Award in 1975, but remains underread compared to her contemporaries. This novel features a sorceress who lives in solitude amongst mythic beasts, only to be drawn into a political and emotional entanglement. Its influence on later feminist fantasy, like Robert McKinley or Naomi Novik, is significant, yet it rarely receives broad genre attention. Number 2, The Inverted World by Christopher Priest, philosophical science fiction and a standalone novel. A surreal, mathematically disorienting novel about a city that must constantly move along tracks to survive. It blends world building, physics, and philosophy into an allegory of perception and social control. Hugely influential among science fiction writers, but still little known amongst general readers. The final reveal is among the most striking of the 70s in science fiction, yet it has not received the ongoing acclaim it warrants. But number 1 is Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said by Philip K. Dick. How does Philip K. Dick put something out and it be the number 1 most underrated of the year? I don't know. This is science fiction of a dystopian style with psychological leanings. Despite being nominated for the Hugo and Nebula Awards and winning the John W. Campbell Memorial Award, Flow My Tears remains overshadowed by Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Ubik. It's one of Dick's most emotionally resonant and structurally coherent novels, exploring fame, identity loss, and authoritarian surveillance with a haunting sadness. A rare Philip K. Dick novel with an actual character arc, it deserves broader readership. 1975 saw the publication of Ursula K. Le Guin's The Wind's 12 Quarters and Roger Zelazny's Doorways in the Sand, both well received. Yet other works from this year offered rich literary and thematic merit while remaining unrecognized. Third most underrated is The Female Man by Joanna Russ, science fiction of the feminist approach and alternate history. This is a standalone novel and a cornerstone of feminist science fiction that presents 4 versions of the same woman from alternate realities. The narrative experiments with form, voice, and satire to critique patriarchy, identity, and genre conventions. Despite later critical acclaim and academic adoption, it received no major science fiction award nominations in 1975, likely due to its confrontational tone and avant-garde structure. Number 2 for this year is High Rise by J.G. Ballard, a dystopian science fiction novel with psychological horror emphases. This is a standalone novel. It's a chilling descent into class warfare and dehumanization inside a luxury apartment building. Ballard's brutal allegory of modern society's fragility was decades ahead of its time, and only truly appreciated after its 2015 film adaptation. Now you're going to go try to find that film. At publication, it received only modest attention outside the United Kingdom and was overshadowed by Ballard's earlier Crash. But number 1 for 1975 is Dahlgren by Samuel R. Delany, science fiction of an experimental literary style, and it's a standalone novel. Dahlgren is a sprawling, non-linear, postmodern epic set in a surreal, decaying city outside time. Frequently labeled difficult, it explores identity, race, sexuality, and language through poetic, often disorienting prose. Hugely influential on writers like William Gibson and Neil Gaiman, yet it has always polarized readers. Just Google it, and you'll see what the heck I'm talking about. Despite having a strong cult following and academic backing, it's rarely given its due, even in mainstream sci-fi circles. 1976, a year that brought wide acclaim to novels like Man Plus by Frederick Pohl and Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. But some outstanding books from this year quietly contributed to the genre without the lasting recognition they deserve. Third most underrated is Dr. Rat, a fascinating novel by William Kotzwinkle. Speculative fiction, a satire with animal rights allegory built in. And it's a standalone. This is a bizarre and disturbing tale told from the POV of a lab rat who champions human experimentation on animals until a global revolt of animals begins. Though it won the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel, its dark humor, grotesque tone, and intense subject matter have made it niche. It's a biting commentary on cruelty, power, and madness that prefigures modern eco-speculative fiction. Number 2 for this year is Where Late the Sweet Birds Sang by Kate Wilhelm. Science fiction of a post-apocalyptic style with genetic dystopian themes. This is a standalone. Although it won the Hugo Award, it has since become strangely underread, especially compared to other major post-apocalyptic science fiction of the era. Wilhelm tells a quiet, emotionally rich story of cloning, memory, and individuality in the wake of ecological collapse. The book's lyrical prose and philosophical focus likely limited its appeal during the more action-oriented sci-fi boom of the late 70s. Number 1 for 1976 is Woman on the Edge of Time by Marge Piercy. Science fiction, a utopian, dystopian story, and in the feminist style of sci-fi. This is another standalone book, a powerful blend of feminist utopian speculation and institutional critique. This novel follows a woman institutionalized for mental illness who begins mentally traveling to a gender-equal communal future. Hugely influential in feminist science fiction, it was long dismissed by genre readers as literary or activist fiction and received no major science fiction awards. Well, we moved to 1977. This saw monumental fantasy releases like The Silmarillion, posthumously for Tolkien, and The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks, things that helped spark the modern fantasy boom. But other brilliant and often more daring books were overlooked or later forgotten despite their excellence. Third most underrated for 77 is The Hour of the Star, which is a inclusion that's not solidly science fiction or fantasy, but it's right on the edge of these genres. This is by Clarice Lispector. It was actually published in 1977, but not translated into English until 1986. The genre would really be speculative fiction, philosophical, a literary style. So you won't find it listed as science fiction or fantasy. And it is a standalone novel. Why it's borderline on these genres and underrated? It's a metafictional novella narrated by a male writer imagining the inner life of a marginalized woman. It reflects speculative concerns with identity, narrative authority, and perception. Again, while not sci-fi in the traditional sense, its existential questioning and stylistic innovation place it in the same space as novels of Le Guin or Delany. It's widely respected in literary circles, but almost invisible to speculative fiction readers. Number 2 for this year is In the Ocean of Night by Gregory Benford. Hard science fiction novel with themes of space exploration and artificial intelligence. Though later volumes in Benford's Galactic Center series gained attention, this first installment of the series, a thoughtful tale of first contact, AI, and existential awe, is rarely read today. It's a brainy blend of astrophysics and introspection, and while it was nominated for a Nebula, it has faded from genre memory. Its influence on science as literature sci-fi is substantial. But number 1 for 1977 is Ridley Walker. The first United Kingdom edition was in 1980. But the first written draft and early US circulation occurred in 1977, so I'm including it here kind of with an asterisk. The author is Russell Hoban. It's post-apocalyptic linguistic sci-fi, and it's a philosophical allegory. Why it's underrated? Though eventually recognized as a literary masterpiece, Ridley Walker was ignored or dismissed for years because of its demanding post-nuclear patois, a devolved English that mirrors its broken society. Thematically rich and linguistically experimental, it's a descendant of A Clockwork Orange and a predecessor to Cloud Atlas, but is still underread even today due to its complexity. 1978. In a year where The Fountains of Paradise by Arthur C. Clarke and Dream Snake by Vonda N. McIntyre received wide acclaim, I've got some other worthy titles that slipped through the cracks. These are books that offered substantial contributions to speculative fiction, but without commensurate recognition. Third most underrated is Who Fears the Devil by Manly Wade Wellman, a fantasy novel, folklore style, and leaning into Appalachian mythic fiction. This is a collection of the Silver John stories. This collection blends fantasy, folk horror, and Americana, steeped in Appalachian folklore, music, and morality. John is a wandering balladeer who faces off against witches, haints, and cosmic evils armed with songs and stories. Hugely influential on rural fantasy and horror, Wellman's work remains criminally underread outside specialty circles. Number 2 is The Alteration by Kingsley Amis. This is an alternate history novel, dystopian science fiction, and definitely a satire. It's a standalone novel. Set in an alternate world where the Protestant Reformation never happened and the Catholic Church controls the West, The Alteration critiques religious authoritarianism, censorship, and gender control through dark satire and subtle humor. Despite winning the John W. Campbell Memorial Award, it's rarely discussed today, even in alternate history circles. Its chilling climax and cool intelligence deserve reevaluation. But number 1 for 1978 is Injun Summer by John Crowley. Science fiction of a post-apocalyptic style, this is a standalone novel. A poetic, melancholic, coming-of-age tale set in a far future world where technology and language have decayed into mystery. Injun Summer is full of subtle world-building, layered narrative structure, and meditative prose, like a canticle for Leibowitz crossed with the Book of the New Sun. Okay, that also makes my brain hurt. It received strong critical praise, but was overshadowed by Crowley's later masterpiece, Little Big. Our last year, 1979. This was the year of Octavia Butler's Kindred and Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a massive breakout hit. But several deeply worthy books flew under the radar and remain lesser known today. Third most underrated for 1979 is The Riddlemaster of Head. The U.S. mass market edition came out in 79. It was originally published in 76. The author, Patricia A. McKillop. This is high fantasy with mythic leanings and is book 1 of her Riddlemaster trilogy. Even with a 1976 original release, Riddlemaster gained most of its U.S. readership in 1979 via paperback. This trilogy blends cryptic world-building, dreamlike prose, and a mythic sense of history. Though beloved by a core fan base, it never reached the popularity of Tolkien derivatives in the 80s. McKillop's work remains among the most elegant and least read of classic fantasy canon. Number 2 for 79 is On Wings of Song by Thomas M. Dish. This is science fiction of a dystopian style and is a standalone novel. A haunting satire of cultural repression set in a future where the American Midwest has become a theocratic prison state, and New York a decaying bohemian haven. The book's title refers to a technology that allows the soul to literally fly, if you're artistically gifted and legally allowed. Despite being nominated for a Hugo and Nebula, it remains one of the most underread masterpieces of literary science fiction. But number 1 for 1979, and my last book for today, is The Road to Corley by Richard Cowper. Post-apocalyptic science fiction focused on a mystical future. This is book 1 of the Corley trilogy. Set in a flooded post-apocalyptic Britain, this lyrical novel blends Arthurian echoes, mystical prophecy, and post-technological reflection. Cowper's prose is elegant and poetic, with more in common with Le Guin or Bradbury than his British contemporaries. Critically admired in the United Kingdom at the time, but rarely read now, even by fans of quiet spiritual science fiction. They just don't even know it's there. And that's where I'll leave you today. Again, a whole bunch of books, 30 from the 1970s. How many of them have you heard of? Have you read some of these? What are your thoughts? Put them down in the comment box. I really value hearing your experiences with these books. And look down in the show notes for other ways you can connect with Zach and me. There's an invitation to our Discord server. Come talk with us and other fans of science fiction and fantasy and horror. Also, our links to our social media pages, our email, and our Patreon. Thank you to those of you who faithfully support us every month on Patreon, helping us afford to keep this content coming out. That's where I'll leave you. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.